Thanks. Yeah, and look, I think structured finance is a really good test bed for AI because you already have documentation, you have waterfalls, you have covenants, and I think from everyone's experience, at best, that documentation is kind of semi-structured, right? At the same time, it's a very hard place to introduce AI into because the margin for error acceptance is very, very low. Because if you misinterpret any covenants or any clauses or you make incorrect cash flow assumptions, then that can have really, really bad follow-on effects, of course. So I don't think AI needs to get smarter, but it needs to get more trustworthy, really. Because, we've seen it summarize documents for so long, but much like you were saying, I think we're going to see it kind of coming in more from a workflow perspective. And that's a fundamentally different proposition. So if you look at something like, which we've seen some great examples of today, real-time operational data, the temptation there is to take every new signal as information. But that, from a credit risk perspective, is quite a dangerous thing to do, right? Because one of the enduring lessons that we've seen in credit risk modeling is that persistence really matters. So if you have a week of bad numbers, that's rarely going to predict defaults. But if you have constant or persistent deterioration, that's where you will see that risk. So I think the challenge isn't whether we can collect more data, but if that additional data helps us distinguish between just temporary volatility and more structural deterioration. So the real-time data should become evidence and not automatic action. I'm very much a believer in human in the loop because what you see there is AI, I think, is becoming very good at processing information. But if you look across all asset classes, not just structured finance, the highest stake credit decisions are rarely information problems, they're judgment problems. So if you look at a ratings process, we would look at, and I should add, I don't work for Moody's Ratings, I work for Moody's Analytics, but we look at, credibility of management, you will look at sponsor supports, you will look at amend and extend. So those decisions carry accountability, and that accountability needs to be human-led. And that becomes even more important a challenge with the higher degree of sophistication. So when you're looking at things like embedding, when you're looking at foundation models or autonomous agents, if that model performs well, but it's difficult to explain, the first question for me is not going to be, oh, can you explain it again? It's going to be, can I trust this? So I need to understand whether it's stable through time. Does it work well across sectors and vintages? Is it predictive during stressed periods? Because credit models aren't validated because they can explain the past. They're validated because they can explain or they can deal with a future that doesn't behave like the past. Bringing that kind of back onto governance, I don't think citations and back tests are enough necessarily. I think they're necessary, but they're not sufficient because if a system based on AI recommends a credit action for me, I want to know where did the info come from? Is it supported? What are the drivers of this? How has the system performed historically? And also risk committees will care about auditability, right? Because you need to understand reproduction of the results, tracing the various data, etc. So I think structured finance has always been an evidence business. Every investment decision that a GP and LP makes, every rating or every model validation decision needs to be backed by evidence. So I think AI won't lower that standard. I think it raises it, if anything.